Growing up in America with a Korean immigrant father, one phrase I didn't really understand was daddy's girl. The sentiment behind that phrase was just so foreign to me, and that's because my dad was someone I did not want to become close with. Ever since I can remember, I saw my dad as this very grumpy and unhappy person. Don't get me wrong, we had our joyful moments, but for most of my life, that's how I felt about him. One time, my middle brother Josh and I were eating dinner at the table with my dad, and my mom was sick in bed, which happened often. But anyway, Josh and I were goofing off as little kids do, being a little bit loud and rambunctious, when suddenly my dad hushed us. "Dinner is a time to eat, not to talk." And while the tone of his voice and the frown on his face and the anger in his eyes staring from behind his glasses were all quite scary to me, I couldn't help giggling as I imagined steam coming out from behind his ears like in the Tom and Jerry cartoons, as the literal steam from his soup was fogging up his glasses. And I wrote about this moment in college years later, and I was so excited to show my dad. I was like, he's gonna love it. He's gonna be so proud of me. But after he read it, there was this long silence. Then he said, "Is this how you see me?" There was a twinge of pain in his voice. I was taken aback. I began to question, do I really know my dad? And if I don't, then what is my perception of him based on? I realized it was based on fear. The fear that if I unpacked my heart, my true feelings and frustrations of having to live with the fear of making him angry, of creating conflict in the home, of not being sure of his love for me, that I would discover that I didn't love him. I needed to reconcile all the resentment I had against my dad, and not just for the time that he treated me and Josh that way, or for the shouting matches he got into with my oldest brother for not living up to his potential, or for the many times he placed his comfort above my mom's, who, as I mentioned earlier, often got sick. She has polio, which makes it hard for her to walk and creates other challenges. But worst of all, I resented my dad for having to live with the constant burden of his unhappiness, of how his life had turned out here in America. My dad moved to America when he was 15. And by the age of 28, he started out in a promising career as an accounting professor, only to struggle to keep a steady job. He carried this weight of his failure for so many years. And he put up walls to hide his shame, even if it hurt himself and those around him. And as his daughter, I just felt like there were times I was knocking and calling out to him, "Appa, I know you're in there. Behind the wall you put up when you were a child and you had to be your mom's protector. Behind the wall you put up as the eldest of three and had to set the example of what it means to achieve the American dream. Behind the wall you put up as a Korean American immigrant who had to prove his worth through status, success, and wealth that never came to you. And behind the wall as a Christian father and husband who had to appear strong and faithful no matter how hard life got." Somewhere along the way, I stopped knocking. I gave up. And I walked away, thinking, this is who my dad is, and nothing is gonna change that. But over the years, there was one person who never stopped trying to bring down the walls that my dad put up. My mom. By the grace of God, she kept praying, she kept loving, and she kept caring because she saw who my dad could be if he would just accept himself and accept help along the way. And now, at 61, I think my dad is finally at this point in his life. He no longer defines success as accumulating wealth and status, but simply as just doing his best with happiness. He gets out of his comfort zone to help my mom by getting groceries or doing a load of laundry. And every day before work, he tells me, 열심히 하고, enjoy 하고, just be yourself. Words my dad longed to hear from his own father, a stern Korean man who never spoke of the emotional trauma he experienced during the Japanese occupation of Korea and the Korean War. Recently, I learned that my grandpa never said I love you to my dad. And the first time my dad said those words to him was when my grandpa was on his deathbed 13 years ago. Hearing that absolutely crushed me. Because while I struggled to understand my dad's love for me, he showed it in the ways he best could. By telling me the same story about how when I was 4, we went on a road trip together, and the entire time we held hands. Showing his affection by smacking my head or pinching my shoulders. And saying how proud he is of me to my relatives, my church members, and other people. All of these things used to annoy me so much. But that was before I understood the heart behind my dad's actions. And through all this self-reflection, my dad and I now have a really close relationship. Looking back on my 27 years of life, what I appreciate most about him is his patience with me. Because it turns out, I am exactly like him. I am his thumbprint in every sense of the word. We're both stubborn, clumsy, and goofy. We're both afraid of failure and of rejection. And we literally have the same thumbs. These toe thumbs. Yeah. So, I guess in our own way, I am Daddy's girl. Appa, I love you.